Hundreds of bills were signed into law in New York last year, some proving controversial. The state will move most local elections to even years, lining them up with state and federal elections. Depending on the length of term for each office, the changes would take effect in 2026, 28, or 30. Many Republicans are vehemently against the change, saying it will take attention away from important local races. New voting laws will allow people to vote by mail and allow same-day registration and early voting. Republicans are suing to stop the mail-in voting change, which no longer requires a valid excuse to vote by absentee. The Clean Slate Act will seal the criminal records of New Yorkers who complete their sentences and then stay out of further trouble. The law becomes effective in November of 2024. Records for misdemeanors would be sealed after 3 years, and records for felonies would be sealed 8 years after the person is released from prison. Murder, sex crimes, and other more serious felony records will not be eligible. Another law adds more judges in the state to deal with a backup of cases. 10 counties, including St. Lawrence County, will get an additional family court judge. The judges will be elected this November. These are just a few of the more than 700 bills that were signed by Governor Hochul last year.